On a bitter winter evening, in a town where the streets shimmered with rain and the neon lights of small shops flickered like weary stars, a boy of no more than 12 walked alone. His shoes were worn to the threads, his jacket too thin to shield him from the icy wind that crept through every seam. In his small hands he clutched nothing, no coins, no warmth, no promise of supper. Waiting at home, only hunger gnawed at him, louder than the rumble of passing buses and the chatter of people hurrying inside to their families. The boy's name was Daniel. To the world, he was just another face in the crowd, but inside his chest beat a heart that carried a weight far heavier than a child should ever bear. His mother had fallen ill months ago, confined to a bed in their tiny apartment. His father, once a factory worker, had vanished like smoke, leaving debts and silence behind. Daniel had become both son and provider, though he had no way of providing. He swept sidewalks when shopkeepers let him, carried groceries for strangers who sometimes pressed a coin into his palm. But tonight he had nothing. No one needed him, and his mother's cough, echoing in that dim apartment, seemed to grow sharper with every hour he stayed away. Through the veil of rain, Daniel's eyes caught the glow of a bakery. Its window was clouded with warmth, and on the other side rested loaves of bread, golden and steaming, their scent spilling out each time the door opened. Customers walked in, walked out, laughing, holding bags that filled the air with promise. Daniel stood there, trembling, as the hunger inside him whispered louder than his conscience. His mother hadn't eaten since yesterday. She had told him she wasn't hungry, pushing her portion toward him. But he saw her eyes that pleaded for something warm, something to keep her strength alive. The door swung open, and a gust of fragrant air wrapped around him, carrying the smell of butter and yeast, sugar and hope. He stepped closer, pressed his forehead to the glass. Inside, a tall man in his late 50s stood behind the counter, wiping flour from his apron. His name was Mr. Romano, though Daniel did not know it yet. The man's shoulders were broad, his face carved with years of labor and quiet endurance. He moved with the patience of someone who had spent his life rising before dawn, kneading dough with hands that had learned both strength and gentleness. Daniel's stomach twisted. He looked down the street, as if waiting for fate to hand him another way. But the rain offered no mercy. He looked back at the bread, his hands clenched. He did not want to be a thief. He had always promised his mother that no matter how poor they became, he would never shame her with dishonor. Yet tonight, that promise cracked beneath the weight of her hollow cheeks, her labored breathing, the image of her lying weak and pale while he returned, empty-handed again. The bell above the bakery door jingled as another customer left. For a heartbeat, no one else was inside. The counter was stacked with small rolls, fresh from the oven. Daniel's pulse thundered. He stepped in. The warmth engulfed him, and his skin prickled from the sudden change. His eyes darted down. Mr. Romano had turned to the back room, perhaps fetching something. The boy's heart raced. His hand reached out, trembling. He grasped a small loaf still warm, the crust flaking beneath his fingers, and slipped it under his jacket. The bell chimed again as he rushed out into the rain, the bread pressed hard against his chest, the guilt already colder than the storm. His feet splashed through puddles as he ran down the street, breath sharp, heart hammering like a drum that would not stop. But behind him came a voice, deep and steady. "Boy." Daniel froze. He turned his head. Mr. Romano stood in the doorway of the bakery, his flour-dusted hands still raised. He did not chase, did not shout for the police. He simply looked at Daniel, his eyes piercing yet strangely calm. The boy's body shook. For a moment he considered running, vanishing into the alleys where no one would find him. But his legs felt heavy, rooted to the ground. He could not move. Slowly, With trembling fingers, he pulled the bread from his jacket. The crust cracked softly, betraying his theft. His voice cracked even softer. "I'm sorry." Rain dripped from his hair onto the bread, and for a terrible moment Daniel thought the man would march him to the police station, brand him a thief forever. But Mr. Romano only sighed, heavy as if the boy's crime was less than the sorrow behind it. He walked forward, his steps measured, until he stood before the child. "Why?" he asked. His voice was not angry. It was low, almost weary. Daniel's throat closed, but words forced their way out. "My mother. She's sick. We haven't eaten. I didn't know what else to do." The bakery lights glowed against the man's lined face. His eyes searched Daniel's, not for lies, but for truth. And what he saw was not cunning or malice, but desperation, the kind that claws at a soul until even wrong feels like the only door left open. Romano reached out his hand. Daniel flinched, thinking he would snatch the bread away, but instead, the man's hand rested gently on the boy's shoulder. "Come," he said simply. Daniel blinked. "Where? Inside. You'll eat properly. And you'll take something for your mother, too." The boy's lips parted, but no sound came. His chest ached with the weight of grace he did not understand. He followed, his shoes squelching on the wet floor, back into the warmth of the bakery. Mr. Romano guided him to a small wooden table tucked in the corner. He disappeared for a moment, then returned with a bowl of steaming soup, thick with vegetables, a slice of warm bread resting on the side. He set it down before Daniel, who stared at it as if it were treasure. "Eat," the man said. Daniel hesitated, shame still clinging to him, but hunger won. He lifted the spoon, tasted the broth, and felt heat and life flood his empty body. Tears blurred his vision. He lowered his head, afraid to let them fall. When the bowl was empty, Mr. Romano brought him another loaf, wrapped carefully in paper. "For your mother," he said. Daniel clutched it to his chest, unable to speak. But Mr. Romano's eyes held something deeper, an ache born not only of the boy's suffering, but of memories buried in his own heart. For years ago, he too had been hungry. He too had stolen. And someone, long forgotten by most, had once forgiven him. That night, Daniel carried the bread home through the rain, his steps lighter though his heart still heavy with wonder. His mother woke at the sound of him. When he placed the loaf in her hands, she looked at him with both gratitude and worry. "Where did you?" she began, but he only whispered. "A kind man helped." She pressed the bread to her lips as if it was sacred. And in the dim light of that broken apartment, warmth returned not only from the food, but from the kindness of a stranger who had chosen mercy over judgment. Yet the story did not end there. Forgiveness, once given, plants a seed, and seeds, even buried in the poorest soil, can grow into forests that change the world. For in the weeks that followed, Daniel returned to the bakery not to steal, but to help. He swept floors, stacked trays, scrubbed pans, anything the man would let him do. Mr. Romano paid him in bread at first, then in a few coins. Slowly, Daniel's mother regained strength, nourished by food and by the hope her son carried home each day. And slowly, in the quiet rhythm of kneading dough and wiping counters, Daniel learned more than a trade. He learned trust. He learned dignity. He learned that one act of forgiveness can turn a thief into a boy with a future. The days stretched into weeks, and the boy who once pressed his forehead to the bakery window became part of the quiet hum inside. Each morning, before the first light spilled across the cobbled streets, Daniel would rise from his narrow bed, kiss his mother's frail hand, and hurry through the still sleeping town. The bakery glowed, even before dawn, its chimney breathing clouds into the sky, and inside, Mr. Romano's hands moved in rhythm with the ancient music of bread-making. At first, Daniel only watched. He swept the flour, that dusted the wooden floor, stacked the trays high with cooling loaves, and carried buckets of water with arms too thin for the task. But in those silent hours, he studied. He saw how the old baker leaned into the dough, folding it with patience, never rushing. He saw how heat and time transformed something ordinary into something that filled bellies and hearts alike. One morning, Mr. Romano handed him a lump of dough. "Your turn," he said. Daniel blinked. "I don't know how." "You'll learn," the man replied. "We all begin with empty hands." Daniel pressed his palms into the dough, clumsy at first. It stuck to his fingers, tore in odd places, refused to obey. But the baker's voice guided him, steady, patient, without scorn. "Gentle boy, firm but gentle. Bread does not respond to anger. It needs care." The words sank deeper than flour and yeast. They echoed in Daniel's chest, where once only hunger and shame had lived. For the first time, he felt that his hands could create rather than take. The bread that emerged from the oven hours later was misshapen, darker at the edges, not yet the work of a craftsman. But when Mr. Romano sliced it open, steam rose in fragrant clouds, and he placed a piece in Daniel's hand. "You made this," he said. Daniel tasted it, tears stinging his eyes. The crust was rough, but it was his. From then on, he returned each day not as a thief, but as an apprentice. And though his clothes were still patched, his shoes still worn, something inside him grew strong and steady. His mother noticed it in the way he walked, and the light that returned to his eyes. At night, when he set a loaf on the table, she would smile through her weakness. "Your father may have left us nothing," she whispered once, "but this kindness, this man has given us a chance." Yet even kindness can draw suspicion. One evening, as Daniel closed the shutters of the bakery, a police officer entered, his boots leaving puddles on the floor. He greeted Mr. Romano with a nod, then glanced at Daniel with sharp eyes. "I heard of a boy who tried stealing bread weeks ago," the officer said. "Looks like you found him." Daniel froze, shame flooding back like the storm outside. He lowered his head, waiting for the man who had saved him to hand him over. But Mr. Romano stepped forward. "You heard wrong," he said calmly. "This boy works here. An honest hand, and a quick learner." The officer raised a brow. "Is that so? You trust him with my bread?" the baker replied. "And with more than bread." The officer studied them both for a moment, then shrugged. "Very well. But keep watch." He turned and left, leaving silence in his wake. Daniel stared at the ground. His voice was barely a whisper. "Why did you?" Mr. Romano placed a hand on his shoulder once more. "Because forgiveness is not a gift to the deserving. It's a seed. You've proven me right by watering it." Daniel's chest tightened. For weeks he had worked with diligence, but now he realized it was more than work, it was trust. Something fragile, something holy, placed in his hands. As winter gave way to spring, the bakery became not only a place of labor but of belonging. The townspeople began to notice the boy. They saw him carrying baskets of fresh rolls to the elderly who could not walk, delivering loaves to widows who had no family left. He never asked for payment. He only smiled shyly and returned to the bakery. And whispers spread not of a thief, but of a boy with kindness stitched into his very being. One evening, as Easter approached, Daniel returned home carrying more than bread. In his pocket lay a few coins Mr. Romano had given him. His mother lay by the window, the sunlight softer now against her pale skin. She looked at him with eyes full of both love and sorrow. "You work too hard," she said. "You're only a child." "I'm not," Daniel replied softly. "Not any more." She reached for his hand, her touch feather light. Promise me, Daniel, no matter how the world treats you, no matter what you face, let your heart stay kind. Don't let bitterness steal it. I promise, he whispered. Her smile trembled, and tears welled in her tired eyes. That night she slept peacefully, but by dawn she was gone. Daniel sat by her, sighed as the sun rose, his hands clasped on hers, cold now, yet still soft in his memory. He wept silently, his chest aching with loss. She had been his anchor, his reason, his mother, and now only silence remained. When Mr. Romano found him later that morning, the boy was still there, his face pale, his eyes hollow. Without a word, the baker gathered him into his arms, as if holding his own lost child. You are not alone, he murmured. From that day on, Daniel's life took root in the bakery. Mr. Romano became not just a master but a guardian, teaching him not only how to bake but how to live with patience, with dignity, with compassion for those who stumble as he once did. Years unfolded like pages in a book. Daniel grew taller, his hands strong, his movements sure. He mastered the art of bread, of pastries, of cakes that drew people from distant streets. The bakery flourished, not only because of the bread, but because of the spirit that filled it. Every customer felt it, the warmth, the welcome, the quiet miracle of forgiveness that had taken shape in flour and fire. One December, snow blanketed the town. Lanterns glowed in windows, and carols floated through the frosted air. On Christmas Eve, Daniel, now a young man, stood at the counter, arranging loaves dusted with sugar like snow. The bell above the door jingled, and in walked a ragged figure, shivering, eyes hollow with hunger. Daniel recognized himself in that face, the same desperation, the same shame. The boy reached toward a loaf, hesitated, then pulled his hand back. Please, he whispered. Daniel's chest swelled with memory, with gratitude, with the echo of a voice that had once said to him, "Come inside. You'll eat properly." He smiled gently. "Sit down," he said. "You'll eat, and you'll take something for your family too." The boy's eyes widened, tears brimming. From the back room, Mr. Romano watched silently, a faint smile tugging at his lips. His seed had borne fruit. Forgiveness had passed from one heart to another, like a flame that refuses to die. And so the bakery stood, year after year, not just as a place of bread, but as a sanctuary. People entered hungry and left with more than food. They left with dignity, with hope, with the knowledge that kindness still lived in the world. Daniel never forgot the night he had stolen bread, nor the hand that chose mercy instead of punishment. That memory became his compass, guiding him through storms, through loss, through life. And when he grew older, when Mr. Romano's hands trembled with age and he passed the bakery into Daniel's care, the young man carried not only the recipes of bread, but the deeper recipe of forgiveness. Because sometimes one loaf given freely is enough to feed not only a body, but a soul, enough to break the chains of shame, enough to turn a thief into a giver. And enough to remind us all that mercy, once planted, can grow into a forest of healing, shading generations yet to come.